Hello.
Greetings,
Well,
everyone.
yeah, I know. Hi. I wanted to introduce myself, and my name is Faye Center, and I just started a YouTube channel called Astrology Heart, where I'm hoping to connect the cosmos and intertwine creativity and introduce people who have been very dear to me and close to my heart, and people who know a lot more than I do about the stars and the heavens. And I'd like to introduce Jeffery Grundtner. I've known Jeffrey for, oh God, at least 5 years. We've been
Yeah,
having some amazing conversations together. And yeah, he's the first person on my YouTube channel. So
and I'm
Jeffrey,
honored and pleased to be that first person. And yeah, we've been talking about it for a while. Let's record some of our conversations as of course, after the fact does not always work. But this will be the first, and we hope to share some knowledge or knowledge, insights, musings about on this particular day. We want to talk about Chiron in the context of the United States, especially, but also in general, what it might mean for people particularly at this time. And uh, that'll at least be the main things that we're going to talk about, and we'll see what comes up. But one of the interesting things that just shows the kind of sometimes miraculous synchronicity of astrology is that we picked a date and a time, and it just so happens that what is going on at this time relates to because Faye and I are close to this same age, and we have Chiron in Aquarius.
right.
And interestingly, um,
Yes, we do. And I've been studying the lunar mansions, and I just need to say that right before we popped on, I noticed that the moon right now is in the 23rd lunar station. And, as is our Chirons, Jeffrey. And that
right.
station has to do with Altair, with Altair, the eagle. And
Yes.
I was thinking about how the US, the symbol for the US is an eagle, which is interesting. And but yeah, no, today we're going to talk about Chiron, and it's really, the fact that the US is in a Chiron return is pretty significant right now. And it's the last day you were mentioning, Jeffrey?
Well,
It's at
it is the last day for the United States Chiron return of this cycle, this 50-year cycle. Now, unfortunately, something has happened to the screens I was going to share. Um,
You need to call in
yeah,
you need to work your other
well, I
magic.
mean, maybe it's not. Um, Here,
Whoa.
let
Yeah,
me see if I can just bring it up again, and by doing it thusly. Here's the United States chart, and you will notice
Can you
here, if
can
you
you make
can
that bigger, Jeffrey? Because I'm seeing like all the change the view maybe.
change the view. Let me see what can we do here? See, mine, it's showing it full screen.
Yeah,
Um,
it's showing all the current setting. You've got all the if you go up to the top where it says view, hit chart, just the try that.
it's in the screen share. What is it showing to for you? I don't see.
It's showing all of the calculated charts. It's showing the
Oh,
it's
so it
very
did not
tiny.
switch. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
it's
Okay,
super
so hang
tiny.
on
Yeah.
then. This is a glitch that we will have to go back and fix if we want this chart. Um, and so let me come back to here. And well, this is what happened before, is it's not giving me what I need. So let me try this. Okay, we're going to stop share, come back to here. and see if it allows me to do um, um,
I
okay.
wonder if it's
Now I've got it. Okay.
okay.
So a couple steps. Sorry about that, but here it is.
Okay. Okay.
So you can see that this is the in the United States chart, and this is one house system. People will use different house systems, so this is just an averaging house system that shows, the midheaven, lower heaven, and the ascendant, and then divides the houses equally. So some people will see this as being in the fifth house, and in this one, it's showing up as the fourth. For all you non-astrologers, never mind all that. But this is significant, which is that Chiron for the United States, when we declared independence, was in Aries. And I'm actually going to make a quick point here, which is that for the United States, this is commonly the most commonly used chart, 5:10 p.m. in Philadelphia, which was the best guess. And but that's when we declared independence, and we were already at war. In fact, at the time that we're recording this, we're at the 250th anniversary of the beginning of the Revolutionary War. Just, 4 days ago was the anniversary of the lighting of the lantern in the North End Church near where
Yeah.
you are,
There
Faye.
were all kinds of activity. There was
Yeah,
so much going on in Concord and Lexington. I live right near there, and there were
yeah.
all kinds of reenactments and people, and yeah.
Yep, those
But
first
anyhow, yeah.
battles at Lexington and Concord, and
Yep.
when it became a hot war because it was actually, I mean, some historians consider it as beginning to some degree before that. But when the first shots were fired, there in your neck of the woods, and so that was a full year, 15 months before the Declaration of Independence. And furthermore, the point that I'm making is that we had to fight a war before we could state, yeah, okay, now we're quote unquote independent. And then people had to gather and have the Continental Congress and decide, well, who are we? How are we going to govern ourselves? And so those are significant dates too. The um, the Constitution was passed on September 17th, 1787. And it took a full 2 more years for various aspects of the government to be seated and start taking action, to convene and start taking action. So those are important things when we're looking at what is the history of it. But we often are looking towards this moment, the United States Declaration of Independence, and that's what we're referring to now. And we're going to talk about the energy, the archetypal energy of Chiron, and what it may mean to the United States. And the notion that it's in Aries is perhaps the most significant part. Now, for
Right.
astrologers who are listening, you might say, "Oh, well, but it's already passed. The last uh, transit of Chiron to this 20th degree happened on February 18th of this year, 2025." But the reason that I'm suggesting that this is the final pass is because there is a uh, I'm just going to stop the screen share for a minute because in in astrology there is the uh, so many different ways of looking at the passage of time and the evolution of uh, ourselves if we're looking at a natal chart, and in this case we're looking at the US chart. And there's a lot of cycles. And so some people might be familiar with the notion of the changing of the age. And that comes from the idea or um, not the idea, but that the planet Earth has another 26,000 year cycle. And I'm making this rotation because I don't know if this is going to show up. Got me a little globe here, but it's because there's a movement that means that there's every 26,000 years. And one of the ways that we notice that is because the North Pole points to different stars in the sky over time. And the background stars shift, according to the seasons. The seasons will always start at equinox, but the background stars will shift over that 26,000 year period. And so
Well,
that's
you like
called
you
precession.
mentioned, we used to have Vega was the pole star, and it's no longer the
Right.
pole star. So
Yeah.
this is an example of the precession, if you will, of the backdrop of things
Right.
moving. But Chiron has a cycle, a 50-year orbit. And so people who were born in 1968 to 1977, you all had a Chiron in Aries. So you're all going to be having a Chiron return when you're about 50 years old. But so that's what we're talking about right now. So the US is having a return to this particular point, and
Right.
things happen. The archetype. You want to speak a little bit about the archetype being this wounded warrior, or I like to think of it more as a maverick, as uh, a forerunner, a sort of an out of something that acts out of the box a little bit. But
Yeah.
um,
Commonly, we think of it as the wounded healer, but you're right. He was also a mentor, a teacher, and in the Greek mythology, the that describes this archetype, which is what we draw on, and is that Chiron was born of a god and an aspect of Mother Earth, and in that in so he was both immortal
and
and
human.
of the earth, and this is kind of a description of the human experience of our awakening to an awareness of an immortal soul while having this life.
And
And
also the fact that our DNA is of stardust. I mean, we are from these
right,
higher realms, if you will, but we're human. So we have these experiences where we come in, with certain wounds, and they show up in different areas. You can see them often through archetype or by house, the placement of where they are in the chart or by the sign. But I was just going to ask you, Jeffrey, what do you think, based on this being an Aries Chiron return, what do you think is sort of up right now in the US? What is the US in particular, with the fact that it's an Aries? Like, how do you
well,
see that?
I think that this is to some extent, it's kind of an ongoing exploration, but there's a couple of salient points that we can bring out. And one would be to reflect back to that initial um, Declaration of Independence. What people were fed up with was one, unitary leader, i.e., the king, even though it was a parliamentary system, etc. He was,
Ruling it
commanding and
all.
demanding,
Yeah.
and they had no say so in that. And so, there and in Aries, there is the desire for Chiron to assert, uh, and really kind of anyone, but it's to assert one's own identity as an individual and
Mhm.
to push oneself out there in the world as an individual. And that identity and assertion principle that we also kind of know as rugged individualism, being able to be self-reliant, uh, being able to
Pioneer,
explore as a
right.
person. What was that?
Pioneering, being
Pioneering, right.
yeah.
And so if we look at, well, what are some of the aspects of the United States declaring independence from a monarchy, even if it was a parliamentary monarchy, but they're declaring their independence, we're going to go our own way. We're going to do something new in the world. And oh, by the way, one of the significant components of that is the opportunity and the ability for self-determination. So it became part of our character, this rugged individualism, and we're doing something new. And in the chart, in that chart, is also the aspect that it is in a tension aspect with the United States sun, which is in Cancer. In Cancer, and some say deliberately aligned with the star Sirius, because they did a lot of things on mystical timing, but or it suggested that that to be the case. But anyway, that suggests that this idea of rugged individualism versus the how are we one big family that's going to work together, Cancer. Um, so that's often been a tension there. And the other thing that um, so it's how are we asserting ourselves in the world is part of both the wound and the medicine that we could um, attribute to the United States Chiron. Because the part that we didn't finish about the myth is this sacred wound that actually compels one to continue to grow and evolve. But in the Chiron process, it's not necessarily about us. If we're talking about an individual, a human being, it's not necessarily, even though we keep trying to heal ourselves or what that essential wounding, quote unquote, is about, we're actually doing that for other people. And it's when we stop identifying with the wound in ourselves and identify with how we can apply it compassionately to others in our exploration that we begin to achieve an elevation in consciousness. That is one of the central features between being released from the limits, because Chiron has this orbit between Saturn and Uranus, released from the limits of karma and the learning into the more free aspect of our own individuality. And so when we're applying it to a nation, it's a little bit it's a little bit different. We have to think about it all very differently because the character of a nation over 250 years is changed significantly, and yet there are many of these same themes that arise. So if this is the fifth Chiron return in the United States, the first one was in the mid 1820s. And just for one reference, because I don't think this is the whole of it, but at that time, the expansion, the manifest destiny, Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson was one of the first to kind of defy the Supreme Court, even though it's supposed to be co-equal government. And uh, did he he was trying to assert a lot of executive power. And some of these themes have repeated, and there may be others, and that's why it's more of a study. But our most recent one from the 1970s, once again, we had an executive that was trying to, tricky Dick, well, yeah, Dick Nixon, Richard Nixon, who was concerned about staying in power and did some unlawful things to try to do that. Uh, and the system held, the system of checks and balances held.
It's so interesting that, here we are, with a person in power right now who's, you know, I don't know, you know, just exponentially more than Tricky Dick,
Yeah,
And it's like, and it's interesting, we've got Pluto in Aquarius, which is Aquarius is about the people. It's, for the people, by the people. I mean, it's really an interesting combination, I think, of having this Chiron in this very independent, you know, as you said, sort of hard aspect to the sun in Cancer, the patriotic, home, defend the home turf, all that,
right.
you know, don't take away our guns. I mean, it's just I mean, you just look around and I think what I find so interesting about studying astrology is that it's everywhere. If you start to look, it's all around you. The correlations are
Right.
really pretty shocking. But anyhow, yeah, just I, yeah, just I'm wondering, like, you know, um, I mean, I remember when Chiron was discovered, I was in high school and it was in Sagittarius. And, I had some really profound moments of making art during that time
Mhm.
frame. So I think what I wanted to mention is just that, it can be this wound on a national, level, and it's also personal, your own personal work. It really is one's personal work, I think, Chiron. I think that
I
represents the,
absolutely agree because it's the other notion. We tend to emphasize this whole thing about, the wound and, and as I just said, but it compels us to become better, more conscious, more, it should be compelling us to become more compassionate as well, more able to see how our own specialized knowledge impacts other people. So totally, your art is, um, I was very moved by some of the things that you had done and what you had learned from, I think, what your grandmother or
yeah,
aspects of your mother, and bringing these elements together in creating these papyri from vegetables
right.
and things. There was just,
And that
I
that's
don't know that I can
that's
describe
my
it all, but
packed fourth
that's,
house. That's
you
all
know,
my fourth house family stuff. It's the root of the chart, it's the ancestors, it's the getting in touch with, the storyline there. But yeah, no, I've been super impressed with what you've done, Jeffrey, in connection with eclipses connected to this particular um Chiron return. And I mean, eclipses for me have been phenomenal. I mean, they got me going into the study of astrology, and we just had a big eclipse in April that was conjunct Chiron. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you did, and the journey you took, kind of traveled, tracing, because I want people to know what you do,
yeah,
because it's
well,
pretty
multiple
special.
multiple things, but because the other element besides the study of the stars, both from an astronomical and an astrological point of view, uh, is um, among the other passions, which I have, like I said, I have a few, but is really working deeply with the earth and the earth's energies. And I can go into a very long story about how that came about, but I'm going to keep it a little bit shorter. So I do geomantic work on the earth and connecting deeply in a shamanic way with uh, our the human relationship with particular places and really the whole planet, but with particular places and the environments that are there. In other words, the natural community that exists there and the historical context that happens there. And to me, those words don't quite describe it. It's kind of because, historical, and we think of books with facts and dates and stuff like that. But to me, when you go to a place, the land has a story, and that story can be very ancient and deep. And one of the things that the land tends to do is it will hold the story of human interactions there, and sometimes in a way, and this is an aspect of, to me, the spiritual nature of all of this, um, of Mother Earth and the life forms that are there, but it holds a story. And if there's in the Akashic, and if human beings have had something really significant happen there, you can feel that. It's in the vibe there. And it is also because all these places on the earth are connected through these energetic systems, they can also impact and influence the whole planet. So that's just a short abbreviation, and there's a way to access those, and it can go back, you know, a few hundred years, a few dozen years, or millions of years, because, I've sat in Vision Quest on ancient rocks and could feel, the waves of the ocean while I'm looking at the stars and wondering who am I? So those are some things that are part of how I live. And so anyway, the eclipse of April 8th, 2024, which some people will recall that across the entire North American continent, Turtle Island, as we call it, and through Mexico, through the United States, and through into Canada. And I knew that I wanted to do a ceremony around that. And once I found that place, I got this guidance that now I needed to, not just a ceremony on April 8th. And the location I chose was where the previous Great American Eclipse of 2017 crossed the path of the one in 2024. And I found a place. And then after doing the prayer work and the meditation, I was guided to do this absolutely crazy thing because it was like short time and nuts.
I
But
could not believe you were
it
doing
was,
that. I mean, it was like, you're doing what? You're driving where?
yeah,
It's like,
to travel the eclipse path and to do ceremonies along the way. And um, and I've done a number of these things, similar things over the course of my life. And I know when the guidance is that strong and clear, go and do it. And I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I did with my friend who was able to travel with me, made it life much easier. Plus, it gave us a balance of masculine and feminine energy. And so she was very supportive and participatory in these things. And we drove all the way up and around the Great Lakes and through Canada because we started where it ended. And we went as far as Prince Edward Island. I couldn't quite go to Newfoundland. Anyway, I go on and on. But from there, these ceremonies that were done, and in each place, some of them I didn't know where I was going to stop. I was just staking close to that central line, and there would be something would be revealed. And then we would do these profound ceremonies. One of the main purposes was to release, to support the idea of releasing stuck energy, whether that be negative or positive, because in the Northeast, especially, actually, it was all the way across the United States, but since we're referencing the Revolutionary War covered that mostly that first half from,
you didn't make it up here. You should have come here.
yeah, but you're
Anyhow,
not on the eclipse path.
well,
I mean, we
okay,
did. I did.
okay,
Actually,
yeah.
one of the places that we stopped on Lake Champlain was where the first naval battle ever for the United
Mm,
States Navy took place on Lake
wow,
Champlain.
wow.
And and
So you're releasing energy, Jeffrey, from the earth, basically,
exactly
or you're acknowledging, you're witnessing, you're
acknowledging it.
saying, I feel you, I know what you went through, and you're doing some sort of ceremony. Did you record all of these? Are they on your YouTube channel?
Well,
Can
I
people
don't
look at
have
them?
them all. I
Or,
tried to do that
yeah,
on the way, and it became difficult for a whole variety of reasons, including the fact that we had to do a lot of this in the winter time.
right.
But my experience with these things is that very often there can be um, intensity of energy that goes on that can
Yeah.
include, really inclement weather and or other things that, and it became
Mercury
very,
retrograde glitches
furthermore,
with the electronics. I mean, I know we've talked
yeah,
about, like, even today we had like all kinds of, it's like it takes a lot to kind of
right.
get through that layer of,
And to be focused in the way that I am focused in ceremony in these multi-dimensional ways, and then to try to be fiddling with electronics, it just didn't work very well. But I have photographs, I have some video clips, um, vivid memories, and I want to record this. I want to share this story because it was amazing. I can't tell you uh, in moments that were just the synchronicities uh,
It's like you need a
and the
scribe.
story.
It's like it's like we need a scribe. You needed a scribe with you,
Yeah,
just like
yeah,
take notes and, you
yeah.
know,
I mean, if I could make a film about it, that would be even, in some ways better because
right,
I mean, but yeah, because it was by the time we got to the second half, because had to do it one half at a time, and that took us, from Indiana was kind of the midpoint. And there were still a couple of sites that had to do with the Revolutionary War, but then it got into, the South and into Texas and into current things. But so it took a span of really the history, not only of the United States, although that was a key piece, but of the whole of Turtle Island, at least the 500-year period of European interaction on Turtle Island. And a lot of things came to the fore, and I think beyond that, there would be some other things. Like one of the first things we did was visited this ancient tree on the shore of Lake Superior, which logically made no sense. Why am I going there? But I was drawn to go there first. And the upper portion of that sacred tree is 500 years old, but the root is 2,500 years old because it's been living there on the shore of Lake Superior for that long.
wow,
And the waves would break it off and it would regrow. And there was something really powerful and significant about that in terms of it reminds us of the importance of our human relationship with the natural world.
yeah,
So all that was done before, all of those ceremonies were done before, and then Eclipse, and to bring us full circle, the reason why it relates to the Chiron that we're talking about, Chiron position, is because that eclipse was a what we call a partile conjunction. It was exactly aligned
yeah,
with Chiron on that day, and it was within a, um, a degree of the United States Chiron. So not
right,
only did it cross the path cross the continent, many of the sites activated along the way had to do with our both the Revolutionary War and many other aspects of the evolution of the United States
right,
and our neighbors, Mexico and Canada. Um, but it had to do with that idea of where's the wound. And some of the things that I told people at the time, because we had to find ways to relate to it on the personal level, and this could be generalized even now, because Chiron will remain in this sign of Aries for a while, but it asks the question, you know, who am I and how am I willing to put myself out there? How do I create my identity? And how
yeah,
am I using those Mars energies
yes,
because they're related?
yes. I
And
mean, I just a side note. I mean, Mars is in Leo, and it's approaching my sun, and I am just feeling like, I've had this. I took a walk in the woods, and after the first the first eclipse, the Great American Eclipse in 2017, I
yeah,
took a walk in the woods near where I live, and I thought of the name Astrology Heart. I came home and Googled it, and it wasn't taken, and I jumped on that, and I have this little website that I post my pictures, but now I'm just feeling like I know so many interesting people, and it's just time to share the people that I know and the things that they're doing, because it is it is a moment in time that we're in where we need to kind of get out of our own way and just kind of put the ego aside a little and say, okay, so what if the video doesn't look the way it should? Or so what if, I don't know exactly what I'm going to be, talking about every second of the minute of the time. But anyhow, yes, it is about knowing yourself and putting yourself out there and taking an action, taking action,
Right.
even small action. Um, but I think what you were talking about, Jeffrey, about this wound connected to the earth is so, and to our human aspect, our humanness, our compassion, our empathy. We need to feel things. We need to feel the heart of a person and a place and you know, I
Exactly.
mean, that seems to be something that's going away a little bit. Or it's harder to
Yeah,
find.
I think there's that these movements are um, a lot of what we see is this, all the technology and which is distancing us from those connections. But I'm also heartened by the fact that when some of the things that I'm so deeply connected to the earth and concerned about it, et cetera. And when I see things like the PBS programs, like The Future of Nature is a recent one, and when it features what a lot of people are doing, and here science isn't getting in the way, but helping. Um, and that's important for us to understand one level of how we interact. But the other one that you're talking about that is so essential, where we are the earth and we are the sun, literally. Earlier you said we're stardust, but we are the sun. What is making my hands move right now? But solar energy that I took in as food that grew on the earth and brought together all of these elements. And so when we understand that our substance is of the earth and our energy is of the sun, then and that we are connected to all of these things, that we are all related, and that heart connection, that heart and soul and spiritual connection that is so essential. We're
Mm,
talking about it being cut off from the earth, but there's another piece that this came out of my near-death experience and many other kinds of things. And this is kind of going off on a tangent, perhaps, but I'll just mention it. We've lost our spiritual connection to the sun as well. I don't know that anybody even thinks about that or has brought it up. Yeah, we're disconnected from the life of the earth
mm,
because we've been taught that by religions and by science and all of that. But what animates it is the whole
yeah.
solar system. And what's
Well,
at the center of that is the sun.
you
There
know,
wouldn't
it's
be any life without the sun. As I said, it's coursing through us right
yeah.
now. It's what's making
Well,
me
it's
talk.
also like I mean, culturally, I mean, the Egyptians were so connected to the sun. I mean, it was just that was their world. I mean, the the whole story of the Duat, the underworld, and it would that realm of the underworld was as important as the waking realm. And a lot of it had to do with the sun, or the
Right.
worship of the sun. So anyhow, yeah, it's fascinating. You're right. We definitely have been cut off by
Yeah, I
so many,
mean, then that connecting on that on
which I
that
think also
profound
with the
spiritual
eclipses,
level.
I think that also when we see an eclipse or a solar eclipse or experience that maybe can resonate. It does something to our bodies,
Right.
it brings us perhaps back in alignment to something.
Yeah, and that I think was what, in at least to the level of my understanding, as these ceremonies unfolded last year, and where they led was reconnecting on so many different levels. I mean, I do live close to the earth, and all of my spiritual work links those things, the stars, that the heaven and earth. But but that was a big piece to to activate, invite for us. That one of the essential pieces of the ceremony was not just for those human beings who gathered with us, but to invite the natural world in a conscious way to participate in our own revitalization as human beings, as two-leggeds, as relatives to all of these different um, not the life forms and the spiritual flow on the earth. So, I mean, bringing it back to the astrology for a moment too, which is we're talking about all these profound changes that are going on. And we were going to be focusing on Chiron and what does it mean that the United States is experiencing a Chiron return, and what is the medicine that it offers, you know,
Right.
to the world. I mean, is where we should go with that, because a country exists in relation to other countries. And
We sure as
I
hell
mean,
are affecting a lot of other countries right now. So, yes, yes.
well, yeah, I mean, I was listening to a radio show this morning where because we live, we here in Minnesota, this connection to Canada, and so our local station was interviewing people in Canada, and one of the economists up there in Thunder Bay was saying that, yeah, it's like sleeping next to an elephant, and every time it twitches or farts, it affects us.
Right. Yep.
And I don't think he said fart. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he said twitch. Every time that elephant twitches, which is the United States, it's this big. And so we're going through these kinds of uh, all these machinations and convulsions. And on the 30-foot scale, we're really sorting out a lot of things about who we are, what our character. There again, it comes back to this identity, and can we be governed, have a government by, for, and of the people, and how do you sort that out? It is a more complicated and difficult thing. It is an Aquarian ideal. United States, moon in Aquarius, and like we said at the beginning,
Yep.
conjunct our Chirons, and there's the moon in Aquarius today. And here's what we're talking about. Not only in Aquarius, but on those degrees.
I
That's
know.
amazing.
I know.
But but anyway, yeah, so we're affecting these other countries as we're going through this process and sorting out, well, what is our identity as the United States, and how are we as individuals within it asserting our identity, and how are we living in an equal society, moon in Aquarius,
Mhm.
and as a um, one united family, if you will, that sun in Cancer, excuse me. And there's many other aspects to that. I mean, we're about to go through a Jupiter return and many other transits that are going to be going on, profound ones. But the I feel that this is related to the whole planet going through a shift in consciousness. And so one of the things that I noted was that eclipse last year, April 8th, 2024, and my own working with these things and understanding is it can take up to at least a half a year. So when the full moon returns to that point, so you have an eclipse, a new moon,
Right.
April 8th, and then half a year away, there's going to be a full moon that's near that point.
When is that, Jeffrey? Do you
Well,
know?
that happened last fall, just
Oh,
two
last
weeks
fall.
before the
Okay.
election.
Oh,
When
right.
and when
Okay.
it reached that point, it was not just close to Chiron, but it was much closer to the planet Eris, which is a whole other discussion.
Right.
But I
Was
want to
that
mention it because
right?
those two bodies are going to be combining the end of May, and then it'll happen over the course of the next 2, 3 years. But Eris, just very briefly, is the goddess of chaos, and it manifests as strife and discord. And the moon there in mundane astrology, the moon is an indication of the public. And so my sense was, okay, the United States Chiron has been activated, but the public has also been activated with this there's strife and discord, and that they're they're choosing not status quo, but rather a disruption. Maybe not what, maybe people weren't expecting what we did get, but it was
Well, yeah,
disruption.
I think also, if I'm not mistaken, there was the first Pluto Mars opposition happened
Hmm.
right before the election.
Right. And
So, and
exactly.
Mars being again the ruler of Aries.
And
Um,
and yes, I mean, I'm sorry for jumping in there,
no,
but
that's
it's
right.
like I think that's a great place because we started the year with the second Mars Pluto opposition, and the third one is coming up in just a matter of days.
Right.
I mean, I don't remember the exact date, but I think,
Yes.
it just 4 days from now, maybe.
Yes, it is.
And and that the first one was across Capricorn and Capricorn Cancer. The next one was in Aquarius and Leo, and so is this one. So
Right.
those notions, even though they happen frequently, can also be suggestive of where I mean, it happens frequently in the sense, I know I'm talking fast here and sometimes skipping over things, but Mars moves relatively fast every 26 months. So Mars opposite Pluto happens frequently. But in the context of these larger transits that we're talking about that are going on, and the idea that you just pointed out that Chiron's in Aries, this is
Right. Well, and the other thing too that it just came to my mind is that we had Mars in Cancer retrograde for such a long time.
right,
And that again was on the US sun, near the US's sun. So Mars is right now at one Leo. So, we're moving, things are moving kind of quick. There's a lot of fire and there's a lot of heat
right,
happening.
right.
Um, but anyhow, yeah. So, and I think again with all of these outer planets that are shifting into Aries, we're gonna continue to be seeing a lot of activity.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
mean, so Mars factor is very, very large in that context, and with the opposite Pluto, it um, there's several things that can manifest about that, including on a positive side, it can be using one's own individual assertive energy, taking action
right?
for more, Mars for more collective empowerment. Pluto in Aquarius, especially.
That's what
But
we're doing. We're
but
doing this.
yeah, but on the other hand, it can also be that the Pluto activity on Mars is to reveal uh, shadow sides of Martian energy, which is, you know, overbearing or dominant, uh, taking action. I mean, these kinds of things that we're observing, and it's in those. The sign of Leo is a sign of leadership, one that has so much. I mean, again, the positive side of Leo being that one who has a big enough heart to share
Right.
and lead other people. That's a thing. And Aries is also considered a sign that leads. It leads because it has enough confidence to take action and take steps. When
Right.
those things get out of alignment with those higher principles, then it's all about that one person taking action. And
Right.
we've seen both of these things. We've seen, you just over these past weekends, a lot of people flooding out onto the streets and going,
Yes.
we don't like what's going on.
Right.
That's Pluto in Aquarius. That's
Absolutely.
we're all equal.
It is.
And
I had a friend who, who was at I've been at different things, different shows. I haven't been able to go to some of these rallies, and she was telling me that a lot of people there were a lot of older people like our age.
right,
And it's kind of like, where are the young people? What are they what are they
right,
doing? And it's kind of disconcerting, but I think about these people who are between 48 and 57 who have Aries in Chiron natally. And it's like maybe, they also can be making some change or doing something to um you know I don't know. Well, so a lot of what we won't know, you and I in our lifetimes, we don't know what effect we're having, So all
right.
we can do is these little things, you know, we're using the technology, we're making little videos, we're, you're traveling around, putting your energy connecting with the earth, Jeffrey, which is so important. I mean, I don't know that many people that do the type of work that you do. It's very, very unique. It's so needed. I mean, there are people, but it's very special. And
I
I just
appreciate that. I kind of
yeah.
wonder at times if I'm not just crazy, I mean, because
Well,
it's like there, I mean,
we're all crazy.
there's some people for whom it has impacted, and I do appreciate that. And the other pieces are, no, we don't know. And because of the nature of it. But I loved what um, Heather Cox Richardson wrote. She delivered a speech as an historian. For those who don't know, she's an historian at Boston College, and she's writing a piece every day. Are you familiar with her, Faye?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
sure because you
She
live
did an
there.
incredible
Yeah,
talk just recently about the the revolution, the 250
right.
year. Yeah, she was incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So she gave that speech, the 250th
Yeah.
anniversary of the riot of Paul Revere, and giving the
Right.
credit to that, it was more
With
than
the
just Paul
lanterns.
Revere,
Yeah.
right?
Did you listen to that? Yeah,
Yeah,
wasn't that
I
good?
did. And that's one of the things I love about her is that she gives credit to all of the people and puts things in the historical context.
Right.
But one of her points that she was making was that, yep, Paul Revere was probably scared and he could have been arrested and thrown in prison, but he did it anyway. And it was a small act, one act. He
Right.
went to the North Church Tower and flashed
He had a key and he could get
the
up there.
he could
Exactly.
get up there, yeah.
Right.
And he flashed the lantern, the
Right.
the twice by sea or whatever it was.
Right. Whoops. Yeah,
And and then but that set a whole thing in motion.
that's right.
And it was the courageous act of one person.
Right. Right.
And so we never know, which is why it is so important for us to understand if we're going to bring it back to the notion of Chiron in Aries. Well, who who are we as individuals, our identity, and how we want to put ourselves into the world. And uh, I often refer to plants it's like the plant that has to get right now, the spring in the northern hemisphere pushes its way up, maybe not even knowing exactly where it's going, but it knows it's going towards the light, it's pushing its way into the world and comes through a crack or whatever. But what we do in forming our identity and bringing it into the world and offering it in that way even if
Right.
we feel wounded in that identity, can sometimes even more so. Like you pointed
Hmm.
out, if people are like who have Chiron in Aries may have challenges with using their
Right.
that projective energy
Right.
and knowing the consequences of it.
Right.
But that's, we've heard too many words now. I'm sorry I did that,
But
but
no, that's okay, Jeffrey. Yeah.
it's just
No,
like
it
the
feels
idea
very,
of taking however we
yeah,
may any of us feel about the woundedness in our own identity and doing it anyway,
that's right. That's
having the
right.
courage to be
Yeah.
who you
Well,
are.
it's follow the fear, it's move through the fear. Move in the direction of your fear. And I'm not talking about the fear that's out there, but like your own personal fear. It's
Right.
like just take it in your hand and say, we're going and do it. I just wrote a little piece, actually, I'm posting it tonight about the plant skunk cabbage. I wrote a little thing
Oh,
about skunk cabbage that's
interesting.
coming. It's coming poking up right now in the Northeast, the eastern skunk cabbage. The heat that is in that can melt the ice
Oh,
and
yeah.
just come through. It's
Yeah.
incredible. It's an amazing medicine, that plant. It was the first
Um,
plant I actually ever took as a tincture. Um, and it years ago, and it helps with breathing and connecting to the earth. I mean, and connecting to the underworld. Anyhow, we were almost like at 45 minutes, and I thought we should just kind of wrap it up. But so you have a website. What's it called, Jeffrey?
Well, it's just my name, Jeffrey,
Okay.
jeffreygruntner.com. And it's, spelled, we can put that in the show notes, but
Yeah, we will.
J.
Because you also do sweat lodges where you are, and you offer things locally where you live.
Yeah,
Um,
in various kinds of ceremonies for people and teaching classes and with a very grounded kind of psychic development, etc. But grief ritual is one of the things that I do,
and I
many of
have
the different
participated
kinds.
in that, and it was absolutely, I participated in that remotely, and it was very profound and very healing. So I can say that if you do another one, I would highly recommend
Yeah,
anyone to participate in that.
yeah,
So
appreciate
yeah,
that.
we'll put some information in the show notes about how people can get a hold of you. And yeah, we've got one more Pluto Mars opposition, and we're finishing up the Chiron to the US chart, and we're in the lunar station 23, which is really incredible. How I just noticed that before we came on, how we've got that both in our charts natally, and the moon is there right now. So,
Can you
and it's
remind people of that, of what the lunar station is?
well, I'm just learning about them, and through a person, and again, I'll put that in the show notes also.
Okay, great.
Jay Hamade, I think I'm pronouncing it right. It's called the Procession of the Night Theater, and he has just finished a lab I was part of, which was part of the Kali Institute, and we went through tracking where the moon was at each of the lunar stations that have to do with the nakshatras, the Vedic um, way of tracking the moon. And it was really experiential, and we all kind of would come together on Monday nights and talk about our experience, our own personal experiences with the particular lunar stations. But I am I did a reading the other day for somebody, and I did use them. And so it's something I'm gonna maybe incorporate into astrology readings, because it just gives another whole perspective and lens that is just very, very unique to the particular station, whether the planet is there, if they're conjunct fixed stars. Again, I'm kind of a neophyte with this, so I'm just learning, but it's fascinating. But the way I interacted with it was I started making art. Like really, it connected me again through um, it sparked a creativity in me again through making visual stuff. I'm
Yeah.
a visual person, so I'll post some of those on my website. I haven't had the chance to do that, but I will do that. Astrology Heart, and yeah, you can find me there and Jeffrey at his website. And I'm hoping that we can actually talk some more because you and I have had amazing conversations about Mars and Venus and
Yeah,
lots of stuff. We're like, God, I wish we recorded that. It's like
right,
maybe
right.
now we can. So
Yeah.
we
Well,
should,
it was wonderful to participate in this, in your first,
yes. Thank you so much.
you know,
I
YouTube
know.
offering. So glad to be there. And I hope we've offered some insights for people to ponder as we go through what we're going through in the
Yes.
world today.
We are
All
going
right.
through it. Thanks,
All
Jeffrey.
right. Thank
All
you,
right.
Faye. Take
Take
care.
care. Bye bye.